World of Goo is a physics-based puzzle game with so much charm and style, and I absolutely love it. Every level you have to get the goo balls to this mysterious pipe up here to get transported off, and you use the goo balls themselves to make structures to get to the pipe, whether it's a tower, a bridge, or any weird contraption in between. Just make sure you save enough goo balls to meet the level quota. I just love how ominous this pipe is, because even the goo balls themselves don't seem to understand where this pipe goes, but they're excited to get in there and figure it out. I just love how every level ends with a cheering sound effect as this lever string thing falls down onto the screen that asks you, continue, and you know what? I do want to continue, so pull the lever, Crunk. Then it shows a fun little animation as the goo balls fill up a tube in the piping and your level stats appear on screen for you to eyeball if you want, I guess. I mean, who are you trying to impress with these stats? Your mom? I'm mostly just here for the fun animation that ends with another lever appearing on the screen that you can pull that drains the piping, sending the goo balls further down the pipeline. It's just a fun way of ending the level and I love it. I also love that this game has a Dr. Seuss-ass art style. I mean, just look at the trees. They look like Lorax trees, and I would know because I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees, and the trees say, "Did you drink your water today?" And I'm glad they did because this video is brought to you by water. Water. Find it in your local mysterious pipe. Most people have them in their kitchens, and I promise you, there won't be any goo balls in that pipe, just water. Unless, of course, you live in Flint, Michigan. Then you might want to find your water elsewhere. But anyway, speaking of goo, World of Goo has plenty of goo, starting off with our standard black goo, albino goo, which isn't any different from the regular goo, it just looks different. The green goos that you can pull off of structures and move them around, unlike the standard goos that are locked in once you put them on a structure, so gotta love the green goos. Then there's these other black goos that you can't really build with, they're just there for the ride, you know, to the mysterious pipe. There's also pretty and ugly goo balls that can be broken up into smaller pretty and ugly goo balls. You also can't build with these goo balls, but the levels that these goo balls are usually in have their own exclusive pipe that only accepts that type of goo ball because they're bougie. Also, if you think I'm being mean calling these ones ugly, just know that that's what the game calls them, and there's even a level where you have to fill up a pit with these ugly ones so that the pretty ones can get through. Anyway, moving on, there's also drool goo balls which make a rope-like structure and, you know, just generally just kind of hang out. But then there's these spiky goo balls that are very similar to the green ones as you can pick them up and move them around, but these ones stick to walls and moving objects to help move your goo structure around the map. Then there's matches goo, which is highly flammable and can cause a chain reaction if it catches on fire, and sometimes you want to catch them on fire, but then other times you don't want to catch them on fire. The next two ones I'm not sure if you can really call them goos, but I'm gonna. Balloon goos are really useful for building bridges and towers because they can really help stable things out. Then there's these bone goos, which can be really useful for building over these spiky areas as you can use them as legs for your structure. There's a couple other goo balls that I'm gonna wait to talk about because they change up the gameplay drastically, and if you played this game before, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't played this game before, thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you check out this cool game. The music of World of Goo is just so good. It just has this element of wonder that's like very fitting for the game. Two songs from this game that always pop up in my head are the main theme song that plays on the main menu screen of this game and Tumbler. Tumbler just has like this energy to it that makes me want to build my structure really fast and up into the sky, which sometimes building quickly can be used to your advantage because your structures will topple over if they're not balanced, but if you move quickly enough, sometimes you can pull off some moves. But also at the same time, when you make contact with the mysterious pipe, it creates a suction onto your structures that can sometimes be used to stable them out. But also on that note, in the level with the green goo balls, I love making contact with the pipe and seeing how many green goo balls I can take off the structure, just slowly dismantling it before my structure ultimately fails. I love how they show you this mechanic in the level leap hole because they only give you enough goos to build up to the pipe, but once you get there, you don't have any goos to go into the pipe to meet your level quota, so you have to start dismantling. Another mechanic that I love is the whistle mechanic, which allows you to start whistling to summon the goo balls to whatever part of the structure you want them to go to, which also shows you that the goo balls themselves have weight. So if you have a bunch of goo balls on one side of the structure, it might make it unstable, and I think this mechanic is beautifully shown in the level that you play right after you unlock this mechanic, Whistler. So in this level, the goo balls are attached to a pipe structure that's unstable and it's swinging back and forth, and you actually use the goo balls to swing the structure over to an island that has a bunch of drool goo balls that you wake up so that you can use them to drop down into the pipe on the other side of the structure. Also on that note, I forgot to mention before, but sometimes you gotta wake up these goo balls because they're very EB sleep. which really this is just a mechanic to put goo balls out of commission, so that way you have to build over to them first before you start using them, which I do appreciate this as a gameplay mechanic. Another mechanic I love is the time flies, because time really flies by when you're having... But I think this is just a really cool way of having a time rewind mechanic without having like some kind of interface on screen about it, or having a random button that you might accidentally click. The time flies are really useful because they kind of just show up and fly around your structure, and you can click on them whenever you want and go back a move back in time. Just be careful not to overuse them because they are a limited resource. Now I'm going to start getting to some of my favorite levels and the story. This game does have a story, but it's very vaguely told through signs you can find throughout the level and a handful of cutscenes. All the signs are painted by the sign painter, who's kind of like the only character there is in this game, and sometimes some of these signs are rather funny. Here's two of my favorite. In regards to the whistle, he says that blowing is not required but encouraged. Sir, settle down. Then there's also, these walls look weak, but maybe that's because I've been working out. I'm so firm and well-toned. 35 minutes of cardio, then upper torso and abs. It's really hot in here, especially down that way. Good thing there aren't any explosives nearby. Oh shoot, is that an explosive nearby? Most of the time he's just giving you level hints like that. But as far as the rest of the story, it seems to be a story about harvesting resources. Like the goo balls themselves seem to be kind of like oil, and the pipe is just there to suck them up to transport them elsewhere. As the game progresses, the world just gets more and more industrial. The first chapter ends with a level where you're in a confined space filled with water as your goo structure floats around. But as you build up further and further, you see these spinning wheels, and once you make contact with them, you get ejected out to see that you were building from the inside of a belly of a beast. You then can remove the beast eyeballs and attach them to your structures as they act as balloons for your structure to start floating off into the sky, which ends the level. And this is actually one of the first levels to end without a pipe, and it triggers one of the very first cutscenes. Which this cutscene pretty much states, as the goo balls flew up into the sky, they could see far and wide, and they could see that the world was full of goo. So basically, they saw more areas to harvest goo balls. But before we move on to chapter 2 and its themes, I just want to talk about this one specific level from chapter 1 with this strange beast where we build a bridge that ends up looking like its tongue, and it's just a very strange looking creature. It's weird and I love it. This level right here is one of the things I think about most when I think about this game. I think about that in this level from chapter 2 where you build over this windmill and you use balloons to just like build directly over it without touching it, because if you touch it, it will destroy your goo structure. But this level comes before the themes of chapter 2. Chapter 2 has a heavy emphasis on beauty, as it's the part in the game that introduces the pretty and ugly big goo balls that can be broken up into the smaller goo balls to be collected in their own exclusive pipes, because again, they bougie. Another level that I always remember from this chapter is the red carpet level, where you roll out the metaphorical red carpet for this pretty goo ball. It's her moment. Does she even know where the pipe goes? Let's not tell her. The music on this level is just so good. It puts the vibes on an absolute 10. Fuck it up, Kyle Gabler. This chapter ends with the level that I briefly mentioned earlier, where you sort ugly and pretty goo balls, and the ugly ones fill up a pit that helps the pretty ones get across. The goo balls then get crushed and sucked up to a further up part in the level underneath this lady statue's arm, and this lady statue has aura. Just look at the way her hair flows in the wind. She's just another thing that I think about when I think about this game. I think about her, and I think about that weird, strange creature from chapter 1. But this level ends with you using balloons to lift the lady's arm so that the goo balls can get to their exclusive pipe that leads directly into this lady's head. Don't let all that goo go to your head, lady. Then we get another cutscene that says that this lady used to be a source of power, but as she got older, her power faded, but now, because of these pretty goo balls, her power is restored. So I guess this is our first use for these goos, using them as beauty products and such. This cutscene also ends with a comment saying that a factory opened to the south, which leads us into chapter 3, which is factory themed. So chapter 1 is just collecting a bunch of resources and figuring out that there's a bunch of it all over the place. Chapter 2 is figuring out a use for these resources, and now we've entered an industrial era for chapter 3. So one of my favorite levels from chapter 3 is a callback level to the weird strange creature level from chapter 1. You might say that this is the same creature from earlier, but you can actually see the original creature off in the distance, and the sign painter even points this out himself. The cool thing about this level is it's like a full reverse of the level from earlier. In the original level, there was spikes on the ceiling and you had to use balloons to help build your bridge, but you had to be careful careful not to hit those spikes on the ceiling. But in this level, there's spikes on the floor, and you have to use these bone goos to make feet for your bridge. Another level that I love in this chapter is the one with the giant robot. I love how the sign painter says, "This must be the robots that built this factory. I thought they'd all been torn apart and scrapped for parts years ago. Oh look, there's one left. It's so cute, but the pipe is right behind its head. Well, you can't stop progress." This sign is just so on theme and I love it. This level is tough too because you gotta build around this robot's spiky head, but also at the same time there's fires on both sides of him and you're only using matches goo. But then once you build above the robot's head, there's a bomb that you can wake up to set next to the robot and then set it off with the matches goo. The final level of chapter 3 has you lighting fire to a Z-shaped structure, which I guess is a ceremonial way of the people of the world of goo launching their new product that they teased earlier, Product Z. Because right after you set fire to the Z, they physically launched their product with a gun, and I just love how they had this massive gun to like physically launch the product. The product being a digital satellite that only is up in the air for like a couple minutes before it crashes back down, transforming the planet into a digital era, leading us into chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a huge gameplay shift because it changes everything. So now everything is digital and all the previous goos that we've interacted with are no longer seen. So now we have these green goos that can launch from goo structure to goo structure, and I love this because it drastically changes the way the game plays. But then we also have these building goos to help build your goo structures, but these ones you can't launch. Then we have these red goo balls that you can also launch, but these ones automatically connect themselves to existing structures, similarly to like the drool goo balls. The really cool part is that you can transform the green launching goos into these red ones. Then we have the only thing that you can interact with in this game that I wouldn't call a goo because they're building blocks. I really love how when you move your cursor around these building blocks, the eyeballs on them just watch you. I really love all the new gameplay opportunities these blocks present, as one of the levels is kind of like a game of Jenga as you're trying to get this goo structure down to the area with the pipe. I really love this one level that's like an artistic version of a chat room, as you have this girl character spraying a bunch of green goos into this boy character's ear, and it's just very silly and I love it. This chapter ends with a level where you stack a bunch of games and applications which are pretty much the same as the building blocks, all the way up to a folder called Shortcut to Mom. Mom is like an AI or like Google itself, and you can talk to Mom about a variety of different topics, but ultimately she asks you to go to the recycling bin to recover lost information. Now before we wander down to the recycling bin, I want to point out that you can actually meet Mom before this moment because some of the earlier levels have hidden Mom signs in them, and I absolutely love that. Now on to the final level of chapter 4, where we have to get this undelete button all the way down to the bottom of the recycling bin to delete it, which causes a bunch of papers and documents to fly out of the recycling bin, and also causing the World of Goo Corporation building to just explode, which turns the world back to a normal world and no longer the digital one that we were living in. It's kind of like the world went from a digital era all the way back to a primal one, which brings us to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is kind of like a return to basics chapter, and it only has 3 levels in it, but the 3 levels that it has are tough. I just really love how this game as a whole progresses. It starts off by introducing new goos with new mechanics as you go on throughout the game, and then they completely take that away and flip the game on its head with the digital era. But then when you start to miss the old gameplay loop, they bring it back with even tougher levels. After you beat these 3 levels, a 4th level shows up, which isn't necessarily a full-blown level, it's more just like an official ending. The final level sign says that all the goos in the world have been sucked up and transported to the World of Goo Corporation building, and don't even bother looking through the telescope because you're not going to be able to see anything through all the smog which was caused by the World of Goo Corporation building explosion. Also, don't mess around with the fish. But you know what, we do end up messing with the fish, and they end up being like balloons that you can use to pull the island that the telescope is on up into the sky. So then we can see above the smog and look through the telescope and see all the different goo structures that we made throughout the game all over the world, but we also notice that all the goo is gone. We've drained the world of goo. So we look up to the sky and see a planet that's entirely made out of goo, which ends up being a goo ball on the lens of the telescope, which is a fun little gag as we scrape it off the lens. But then we see the goo contraption from chapter 1's finale just floating off into the sky. You know, just casually floating off into space as it floats past a planet that's full of goos. I just love how this game's story is like collecting resources, finding a way to use them, then you industrialize, and then you go into a technology era, only to destroy ourselves and go back. I feel like there's probably even deeper meaning to this game, but that's just what I understand of it. I love World of Goo, and I hope World of Goo loves me back. Honestly, I played through this game probably more than I should have. I've beaten it several times since the very first time I played it, when I used to do a series on this channel called Game of the Week, where every week I'd pick a game, play through it and review it on a weekly basis, which was a horrible idea for a video series because that's not enough time for a proper review for most games. But this game was probably like one of the only games that I played through fully before reviewing it. Also, don't go looking for that video unless you want to jump down the recycling bin and delete the undeleted. Also, before this video ends, I want to show off the Steelbook edition of this game that I got from Super Rare Games. This Steelbook is honestly one of my favorite Steelbooks that I own. I just love the art on it so much, and it also comes with some collectible cards as well as a postcard, which I will never use. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave me a like, maybe subscribe for more content like this, and if you also love World of Goo, I'd love to hear about it down in the comment section down below, and maybe even consider checking out some of my other videos. There may or may not be a video about Little Inferno somewhere on this channel, and if you like World of Goo, you'll probably like Little Inferno. May or may not be developed by the same people. I don't know. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.